He didn't think of women as the opposite sex until he was 25. The fact that he grew up with his childhood friend played a large role, and after he entered university and moved to the city, he forgot about that faraway countryside. There were only mountains and rice fields around, and tractors were just driving along the roads with cars. There were not many houses, and it took an hour to walk to the elementary school. There were only about 5 or 6 children in the neighborhood, so there were no children in the same grade in the neighborhood. When asked about his hometown, he told stories of this nature. Most people seemed to think he was exaggerating, but in fact there was no lie at all. In fact, the toilets in this area were still flush toilets, and although they heard that a new housing complex had opened about a kilometer away and the number of children had increased slightly, the scenery had not changed much. There were always only mountains, rice fields, and farms. When she came to visit him in the city, she brought a Tupperware container full of local vegetables and ohagi, rice dumplings, that she had made herself. The rice balls, each the size of a child's fist, were individually placed in an aluminum cup, and the woman's mother remembered that her rice ball making was well known in the neighborhood. Mom said she'd be relying on you for a lot of things. I helped make this with part of my help. Have some rice balls. She said this, but her disjointed, hard-to-understand way of speaking hadn't changed at all. She graduated from high school at the age of 18 and went to junior college. She worked at a local company for a while after that, but at some point she was no longer able to go to work. She was diagnosed with autonomic nervous system disorder, and she quit her job and came to the city. Compared to her life, his seemed to be going well. He went to a prefectural high school and came to the city when he entered a national university. He had heard rumors about him, but in this town, if you mention the name of the university he attended, you are respected in some way. It doesn't matter what department you're in, as long as you're a university student there, you're already special in this area. That's why he, who is in the literature department, was given preferential treatment at his part-time job. When he was a third-year university student, he happened to find a magazine on the internet and wrote a novel and sent it to it. About a month later, he suddenly received a call from the editor. The editor said, "I'm thinking of sending this to the magazine for its New Writers Award in the fall, and I'd like to work with him to revise the manuscript." He had no idea that a New Writers Award was something that was selected with an editor involved in advance, but needless to say, this was his chance. When he sent the manuscript as an email attachment, it was printed out, handwritten and read and corrected in various ways before being sent off to the editor. That seemed to be the editor's style. In October, his work was shortlisted for the New Writers Award, but it didn't win. Still, it was a surprise to see his name in a magazine. At a time when everyone was starting to look for jobs, he was writing a story for the New Writers Award the following year. It was a story about a girl vampire and the two of them setting off a bomb in a department store. He had thought up the story after hearing the editor's opinion that he wanted it to have a little more impact than before, but after 2 weeks of back and forth, they decided to try again with a new one. However much he wrote, his work never won a New Writers Award. The New Writers Award is only awarded once a year, so the chances are limited. He wrote novels without getting a job, under the pretext of going on to graduate school. Regular part-time work would take up too much time, so he found a part-time job at a funeral parlor, called a ceremony staff member. The pay was good considering the hours required. At graduate school, he said he was writing his master's thesis, but in reality, he spent all his time writing novels. It was around that time that she came to see him. She was introduced to a clerical job at a girls' school by the employment office. The salary wasn't that good, but she told him that her current workplace would teach her a lot of things and she thought she could manage. It was mostly just impulse that she came to town. She didn't know anyone here. However, since he was from the same hometown and had come to town before her, she said later, when she started dating him. If he was dating her, he should have told the people around him, but for some reason, He couldn't tell his parents or friends about her. Somehow, when they were walking together, he felt like he didn't want to be seen with her. Although she probably spoke normally at work, she would speak in her dialect in front of him. It was the sound of a cat mewing and the dialect people used to tease each other, and when they argued alone, he would also speak in his dialect and say, "That's not right." At her request, they went to aquariums and amusement parks, but rather than those places, they spent more time looking around second-hand bookstores and general stores. When he found earrings or necklaces in general stores, he would pick them up and try to see which ones would look good on her. When he told her about books he recommended, she dutifully bought them. Sometimes she would give him her feedback. Sometimes he would misread something, and sometimes he would say, "It was too difficult for me." But still, the two of them went to the second-hand bookstore and the woman bought a book. Basically, she was the one who listened to him. She listened to him show off his knowledge without interrupting much. Come to think of it, they had a similar relationship when they were elementary school students walking to school together. However, he felt embarrassed about the fact, so he kept quiet about it. "Because I don't know anything," she said. "That's why you tell me everything." About 5 months into their relationship, it was her birthday, so he took her to a store. It was a perfume shop. At first, she was embarrassed to go inside the store, but as she tried out different scents next to him, she seemed to calm down. In the end, she chose the rose scent. From then on, she started wearing it. As he walked with her, he saw her reflection in the window and thought, "She's certainly become prettier." "I'm sorry for your loss," he said as he continued working part-time at the funeral home. As he helped out at the reception desk, people who came in wrote their names in the guest book and disappeared into the hall. He had only intended for it to be a temporary part-time job, but now the office had even prepared a uniform for him. This time. As he kept repeating this, he remembered her. It was 3 months before the deadline when the editor contacted him to say that he would try submitting his work to the New Writers Award again. During those 3 months, he stayed in his room, hardly attending graduate school classes. Whatever he wrote, the editor replied, "I can't see what you really want to say." He continued to write, line by line, as if squeezing water out of a dry rag. Even if his work was accepted, he didn't think he could continue writing like this. He thought he would probably collapse before that happened, but he had no choice but to write even if it meant cutting down on his sleep. While he was struggling with his work, she was also facing a problem. The university had contacted her to say that there had been a mistake in the certificates she had processed for the students. To make things more complicated, the deadline had already passed, and in the end, the student who had submitted the documents was unable to participate in the student project that the university had hoped to participate in due to the incomplete documents. In reality, it was not her fault, but the veteran office worker she worked with, but the office worker did not mention that fact. The way the conversation was going around was that it was her mistake, and from an outsider's perspective, it would have been more natural to say that the new female employee had misunderstood what her boss had said. Instead, the veteran office worker wanted to help her as much as possible. The student who was unlucky enough to not be able to participate in the project was still not satisfied, even after hearing the school's explanation and apology. The student's parents called repeatedly, pleading, "This has a big impact on my daughter's university recommendation. Could you please contact the university again?" Both she and the veteran office worker requested an exception, but the university would not accept it at all. A mistake is a mistake. You can't accept something that doesn't meet all the conditions. In the end, the situation settled with her taking responsibility. While feeling uneasy inside, the veteran office worker scolded her in front of everyone, telling her to be more careful with her paperwork. A letter from the parents arrived at the school, saying that the office worker should be replaced. She wanted him to listen to her troubles. If possible, she wanted him to meet her face to face, sympathize with her feelings, and encourage her. So she called his room several times, but he had just received an evaluation from his editor that it's worse than the last time you showed me. On the other end of the phone, he did his best not to interrupt her as she spoke, occasionally going back and forth between stories that seemed to have no connection. There were only 3 weeks left until the deadline. He wanted to win the grand prize this time and take her on a trip with the prize money, but he hadn't told her that yet. In the first place, the fact that he was writing a novel was somehow embarrassing, so he had kept quiet from the woman that he had been nominated for the New Writers Award and that he was continuing to write. He said as she repeated her tangled story several times on the other end of the phone. "Is that something I need to hear now?" the man said. She was surprised. She hadn't really known that side of him until then. To her, he was an older person she could always rely on, someone who always knew everything. "Am I? What do you need?" They argued for about 2 hours, and at the end of that long conversation, she said, This time. A voice said, "Congratulations on your marriage." When he looked up, all the relatives were gathered, and there was a lot of noise. Her mother, who is good at making ohagi, was also there, of course. Her mother, wearing a kimono in a calm color, bowed to him and said, "She's a clumsy girl, so I'm sure she'll cause you a lot of trouble, but please take care of her." She walked quickly to the bride's waiting room. There, she was surely changing into her white wedding kimono and waiting for the ceremony to begin. It was noisy everywhere. All the relatives he didn't usually see were gathered together, and they were greeting each other here and there in the hall. And the word congratulations could be heard everywhere. They were the main characters today. This time. He bowed again, and found himself standing alone at the entrance to the hall at the funeral hall. While he was daydreaming, thinking that the scene of the wedding ceremony from earlier was still continuing, his boss called out, "Come over here quickly. Come help with the floral tribute." Across the hall, the relatives were gathered around the coffin of the deceased, exchanging final words. 6 months after she broke up with him, she was confessed to by a math teacher at her workplace who was 8 years older than her. The math teacher had been divorced once, but she accepted the marriage. He heard about it on the phone from his mother. After that, he decided not to go back to that countryside. For about 10 years, he did not go back to his parents' house. There were times when he could not bear to go back and listen to her talk, but there were also times when the novel he was writing won an award and he became busy. If he had just brought his laptop, he would have been able to work at his parents' house, but he did not do that. He just wrote. Once he wrote one piece, the next one was waiting. It was like an airplane that kept flying, and he felt like he would fall if he let up even a little. But people who didn't know him that well praised him and said he was lucky, and when his book came out, the place around him got lively. All kinds of people surrounded him. He had to deal with that. "When I was young, I wanted to be a writer, too." One day, at a book signing event at a bookstore, someone approached me with a smile. That would be like being a tiger at the zoo. He felt a little regretful when he saw the expression on the person in front of him clearly change. He wanted to explain that he wasn't angry at her, that he was just a little tired, but it was too late. So, even though no one had asked him to, he added the name of the person and the words "with love" to the autograph of the book. "You've changed since your book came out," his mother said to him on the phone one day. "I know you're busy, but if you have time, please come back. You don't know how old your father is, do you? We're both old." When he returned to his parents' house for the 10th time, he realized that many things had changed. When he entered the entrance, he was hit with the smell of damp air that reminded him of the smell he had when he was a child at his grandparents' house. And the souvenirs he had bought for his parents were almost meaningless here. Collapsible vases and potted plants that don't need frequent watering may have meaning in the city, but they seemed to have lost their place in the countryside. After that, he made arrangements to go back once a year. It was quite a change from when he was a university student and always went back home for long weekends, summer vacation, and New Year's. He turned 43. October was his birthday. He returned home with his new book, which had come out last month. It hadn't been made public yet, but the work was scheduled to be made into a TV drama next year. "She's here now," his mother said, watching the TV screen at night. At first, he didn't know who she was talking about. But as he listened to her story, he realized it was her. She was divorced and alone now. "She came to say hello yesterday. She had your book with her. I told her that she would come back tomorrow and we could meet, and she politely went home." It was probably less than 10 minutes walk. Once he got onto the national highway and walked down the hill, he soon arrived at her house. It was the same road he had walked many times with his school group in elementary school. He had left home at 7:40 in the morning and walked down the hill to school with his girlfriend. In the novels he was writing, he had slipped in messages that only he and she would understand. At first, it wasn't his intention, it was just a coincidence. But in some of his novels, he had secretly slipped in things related to her, like birthdays, old nicknames, the music they both liked. It seemed like an abuse of power, but it was really just something small, and probably no one would notice his intentions. Except for the person who read it. He was 43 years old. If he carried on like this, he would probably be blessed with a few more jobs in life and move forward. Considering his personality, he would spare no effort in any way he could to meet the expectations of those around him. He had written happy endings in several of his novels. Making the ending bright and hopeful sometimes met readers' expectations, but in reality, the reality was so sad that he couldn't help but want to make it on the bright side. However, there would come a time when he was no longer needed as a writer. All that would remain were the books he had written, and that would be the end of his life. The things he had wanted so much when he was young, once he had obtained them, lost their special luster. Even if that was the truth, if he had someone nearby in his life now, his life might change just a little. He needed someone. Yes, he could say that he really did need someone this time. And he hoped that, with any luck, she would also need someone to spend the rest of her life with. If after a long time she was in the countryside again, he thought, that was a big trend in itself. In that case, he might as well go with the flow. Thinking this, he smirked, as if he was making excuses to himself. He was about to bring his book to start a conversation, but then he realized that wasn't right. It wasn't like that. He should have gone to meet her as the person he was before he became a writer. He pictured her after not seeing her for a long time. Perhaps they had grown older. At the same time, he imagined their future, where they were trying to live a settled life together. Experience and time would change them. Perhaps they could do better than before. As he went outside, he picked up a book. It was a thick volume that had been left on the bookshelf at his parents' house. It was the story of a man who had been waiting for a woman for 51 years, 9 months, and 4 days, and it was a translated version that he had introduced to her a long time ago. He had no idea how it ended. The ending was in the book in his hands. Would she have children? What kind of story had been brought to her during this long period? He didn't know. He didn't know, but he thought that he needed her now. The ending was attractive precisely because it was still unknown, and it was both frightening and possible. Just like a person's life.